Production support for Hot and Cold is brought to you by American Solar Technics, manufacturers of components for wood burning and solar heating systems. Hey, I'm Tom Gozy. We're down in the basement for what will be the last show in the basement for a little while, just in time for mud season, which comes early in this basement, but you'll see all kinds of fun things. Then we go upstairs where it's dry. Stay with us, we'll be right back. So we're down in the basement. Like I say, we're wrapping stuff up down here for a while because the snow is melting outside, the basement's starting to get wet, and just in time, I finished up most of the basement projects for a little while anyhow. The big project is, there's a cover on that fuse panel for a reason, that circuit breaker panel, because everything is in, everything is wired. We got the new service cable in, new service drop outside. The old panel is completely gone. It has left the premises. Actually, we're going to reuse it somewhere else because it was in good shape. It was just in the wrong place. And we've got everything hooked up now. You notice here, I've got it labeled. Remember when we were putting the wires in, I've labeled all the wires when they were going in. So it was a simple matter with the cover off to make sure where everything went. They come with the labels. The panel comes with labels. So we were able to label some of these ahead of time. And then over here, I have a little more detail in that breaker 1 is the kitchen counter outlets, breaker 2 is the bathroom outlets and lights, breaker 3 is the heat, breaker 4 is the stove, they call it the range. Hey, you get the idea. Anyway, that's all done. We've got 2 here arc fault interrupters for the 2 bedrooms. So if anything ever shorted out, we've talked about these before, we've got 2 arc fault interrupters. We have ground fault interrupters on a lot of these circuits upstairs, not down here, so if they do trip, it's easy enough to reset them. And the panel's all done. And we got a 100 amp panel, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 open spaces still, so we have some room for extra stuff, like if we want to put an outlet outside to plug in when you're buffing the car or whatever it is you're going to be doing outdoors. It'd be nice to have at least 1 outdoor outlet. So we may do that later in the future. But that's all done. Everything's labeled. It's out of the way. I am tickled to no end to have all the wiring done. I've got a garbage bag full of old wire and a bucket full of more old wire, which I'll take to the recycling place. And the good news is that we're able to clean up a lot of this stuff now because it is getting pretty wet down here. The floor, if you look behind us there, is all turning to mud because it's mud season. All the snow's melting outdoors and it's coming in through the basement walls. That's one of our projects to attend to that. But the other wiring issue, the reason we got this done sooner rather than later was because I made a big stupid boo-boo back when I was doing wiring on the first floor. I had a routine I had where we put a screw down through the floor so I could tell where to drill up through the sill to get into an electrical outlet. And that worked out very well up to the last outlet on the first floor where I put a screw into this cable that comes in from the meter. Just like this, exactly the same cable. And this is the actual cable. And what happened was if we open it, we go right here. I think we have enough light down here. See that? That would be a screw hole into a cable that is rated for 100 amps, but when you short it out, it actually runs through about, I don't know, what is it, 100 times more? So it's about 10,000 potential amps that can go across a short. So what I've done here is if we take the insulated outer housing away, we see a burn mark. That's not good. We take back this insulation, which is melted, and we see where the screw went through into the cable here. See that little hole there? And this is the grounded outer sheath, and when it didn't short when I put the screw in, but when I extracted the screw out, it must have touched these ground cables, and these being aluminum, they melted right away. So at that point there was it melted far enough, and the screw came right out. So it melted away, and there was no potential for a further short, but I was not real happy about having this in the house, and of course we got it done as quickly as possible. But there is a good size hole in the insulated sheath of the wire. So this is garbage now, but I wanted to show you whether it's a small wire or a big wire, we want to be real careful. This could have been really bad in that you could be watching this show with another host, which might have been a good thing, I don't know. Or we could have set the house on fire, which was my major concern. I was upstairs where it was dry, so it was unlikely I would get a shock from this, but certainly this could have started a fire, and it could have been really catastrophic in an old house like this. The other reason I'm happy to be done with the wiring is because this floor is so wet. I'm not real crazy about having my hands in an electrical panel standing here on a wet floor. That's a great opportunity to get electrocuted. So it was good to get all this done last week. It's all buttoned up now. In Scout's honor, I'm not doing any wiring for a while because everything is pretty much set. But we still have other projects that we're doing. Do we have to take a break here? Not yet. So we're going to set over and look at one of the other projects, which has something to do with that. Look at that. The electric water heater is sitting there. It's all disconnected. I think we should go and see why. Right over here. So what we did is we took out the old electric water heater because we've had this in the basement since autumn. This is a Amtrol tank, a domestic water tank that ties in with our Biazzi boiler over there. And you notice they're color coordinated. They're both the same color red. Isn't that cute? Anyway, the Amtrol tank is a Boilermate we've used a lot in a lot of projects. I'm very happy with them. I put them in. I never had any issues with them. They've lasted a good long time. So what we're doing is we're making domestic hot water now off the heating system. And it's a fairly simple device. This one has a manual control right here. We can turn the water temperature up and down with this knob. All the way up there would be 120 volts. 120 degrees. And all the way down here is where we had it. We had it relatively low. And it seems to be keeping everybody happy. We've got a control wire that comes out of here. This is just a aquastat, just a simple switch that turns the boiler on and off. That runs back to the boiler. We could also use the same control to turn a circulator pump on and off. And there's really not much to it. These are steel tanks that are lined on the inside with plastic, and there's also foam insulation, and they work extremely well. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to have to take a break here in a moment. But we'll look more at the hookup part of it. But these seem to work extremely well in terms of efficiency and in terms of displacing electric water heaters, especially for wintertime performance when the heating system running. They make a lot of sense, and my experience is they still work out really well on a year-round basis. So we've got this in and hooked up. Everything is plumbed with PEX tubing, which makes the hookup extremely simple. I spent more time making sure I had the right plumbing connections as opposed to hooking it up. The actual hookup was about 5 minutes using plastic tubing. So, but we'll take a look. Let's take a look at all the plumbing hookups right after we take this quick break. We'll be right back. Hey, we're back, and we're looking at our Amtrol water heater tank here down in our project house, which I hooked up the other day. Being such a wet, muddy place, I think eventually we're going to dig this out and we're going to have a slab here. But right now, excuse me, I have the Amtrol sitting on some cinder blocks so water can drain from underneath. We have a canal that goes to the sump pump. God, I love main basements. And I put a piece of styrofoam on top of the blocks just so the metal, because this is steel, is up off the masonry, and it will stay dry. So that kind of makes a lot of sense. It's level, and so this will not stay wet and will not rust over time because it is steel. And regardless whether it's a wet basement or dry basement, I think you always want to segregate metal stuff, whether it's a boiler or it's this, up off the floor with some cinder blocks, just to make sure that if you ever do get water in the basement, we're able to keep things from rusting. Because what a sin it would be to have something like this rust and have to replace a tank because a little bit of metal rusted as opposed to the rest of the tank being in fine shape. These last so long, I want to make sure that I do everything right in that regard. The hookup is fairly simple. We have, and it's labeled here, we have boiler supply on this side, hot water going in. We have cooled water coming out. Very simple. These go to the boiler. And we've done this with PEX tubing. These are 3/4 inch male connections. So we have 3/4 inch female adapters that crimp here. In this case, I used a couple of 90-degree elbows just to keep the plumbing neat. Cold water goes in the bottom of the tank here. This came with this brass T and this brass boiler drain. So all I needed to do was have a connection here. Again, we've color-coded it, so we have blue tubing for cold water in. And then off the top of the tank up here, we have another T that allows us to put the the pressure relief valve in, and the hot water comes out here. You'll notice there's some mud on here because it was pretty wet the day I did this. So we've been, I mean, any day I come work down here, I get extremely muddy. So now, going back to our manifold plumbing system for just a moment, here's the cold water comes in here. Cold water comes out the bottom here, going to the Amtrol. And then off the top here, we've got that half-inch piece of hot water tubing coming in where all the red fittings are. And these are all our hot water connections. So everything is extremely compact, extremely close together. We have very limited plumbing runs. I am going to insulate these two heating lines that go back to the boiler because these are warm, and we want to just get the heat where we want it to be, not have it just heating the basement. There's enough heat happening down here. We don't have to worry about that. And it's very, very simple. It's just been a matter of getting everything else done and getting all the wiring and all the stuff out of the way that was going to be a nuisance before we hook this up. We got to that point. That got in. The electric water heater is going to go bye-bye. And we're very happy with the results. We're getting ample hot water, as I knew we would. And I just realized that we've got everything done over here now. Excuse me. In an upcoming week, I think what we're going to do is we're going to pop the cover off this and see how easy it is to clean this Biazzi boiler out. So that'll be a fun TV show too, which we'll do in the not too distant future. But you know, the Amtrol tanks, you can't say a lot about them because they just work and work and work. So I'm very, like I say, I've put in probably 4 or 5 in the recent years and have never let me down. And the oldest one I think I've had in for about 12, 15 years now. And it's my experience is that these things just seem to hang on forever. It's good design, good technology. You know, they do make stainless steel water heater tanks too. They seem to work well. I don't know if one is better than the other because these seem to have stood the test of time. They've been around long enough that I'm pretty impressed with what I'm seeing. And cost-wise, probably to have this installed, is probably around $1,200–1,500. But if you have a cold start boiler, you got to have one of these. Anyway, I think, other than the fact, one other thing. Interesting problem we have when we do this kind of work in a basement related to hot water heaters. And we're going to go over the other end of the basement where the electric panel used to be, and I'm going to show it to you. So just a point of reference now, this is where the fuse panel used to be right here, the old one. That's all gone and we can breeze through easily. That wire that I hit with the screw, in my defense, one of the reasons that happened is it came in between these two floor joists, and you can see there's not much room here. So it was kind of well hidden, and it was sort of out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. This is what I wanted to show you. We have an expansion tank on the domestic water system. And the reason we have the expansion tank is because of this device here. This is the water line that comes in from out at the street. We've got a shut-off valve. We've got the water meter. We have a backflow preventer. If you're tied into any municipal plumbing system, you're going to have a backflow preventer here. This prevents cross-contamination, water or wastewater, excuse me, getting picked up from inside the house and back feeding into the public water system, causing contamination. Another shut-off valve, we transition then to the plastic, goes to the water heater. Once this is in here, if this was not here, with any water heater, be it electric or gas or oil, whatever, when it heats up, water expands. It gets bigger. And if this wasn't here, it would just expand back into the street, into the public system. It'd be fine. If you're on a well system, it'll expand back in the expansion tank in your plumbing system. Once you put this valve in here, it does not allow the water to expand. So what will happen is the water heater, as it gets hot, starts to dribble off the pressure relief valve. It happened with the electric one. It wasn't a big deal. And I wasn't thinking about it, of course, when I did the changeover, because I kind of ignored the problem. I knew it was happening, and yeah, you kind of forget in the process of doing things. Hooked up the new one, it was right there in my face. So we put an expansion tank in. The expansion tank hookup is about $50, $60 worth of parts. We just cut a T in anywhere on this side of that check valve, this backflow preventer valve. Anywhere on this side, the house side, the expansion tank accommodates the expansion of the water within the system as it heats up, and these last a very long time. So we just cut it in here with some PEX tubing. Again, it only took a couple of minutes to do, and nothing dribbles anymore. Well, I do a little bit, but that's another story. Anyway, we got to take a break here because we're going to go upstairs, look at some, I did things upstairs too. I wasn't just down in the basement, you know. We'll be right back. Hey, we're back, and we're upstairs now. We've gone from one extreme to the other. This is the last bedroom that I was wiring up, and we've got all the wiring done, as you know. All the outlets are in. So now I need to start looking at a couple of other things up here that are underway, I guess. The big one is to finish this room up, aside from where I've mutilated the plaster and stuff, is we need to do something with the floors. And I'm not quite sure what to do yet. I think what we're going to do is put a new hardwood floor over this floor. And one of the issues is this is an old attic floor with old wood. And you can see here as I put my level across, you can see we've got some dips and weaves here. There's a gap there, 3/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch, in between the high points and the low points. So we can't just go and put something real thin, oh gosh, like a laminate floor on, because it's not going to be well supported. We would either have to level up the floor by using leveling compound, or put another layer of plywood over everything, or take up some of the boards. There's 2 layers of boards here, as you recall. Take up 1 layer and put down plywood across the whole thing. Kind of expensive. I think what we're going to do is get some kind of engineered hardwood floor that has some thickness to it, so we can span some of these dips that we have in the floor. But that remains to be seen. The other thing is, I'm not sure why they did it this way, but the old timers had set the baseboards in before they did the plaster, and they brought the plaster right down the baseboard. So we've got to, we're going to cover these baseboards right over with new baseboards that'll be a little bit higher with a piece of molding on top, so we can hide what was here. The good news is we don't have to take all this apart, and also we have something solid to nail to. I've just screwed this. I'd taken this piece off to get in for the wiring, and I just screwed this back in place, so we have, so there wasn't a gap there, because it obviously is recessed 3/4 of an inch. And then we'll also be doing some touch-up on the drywall here on the plaster, because of the issues of somebody coming in and hacking the heck out of it with a recip saw or a saw to get everything set. One thing you may know, I think we might have shown where we, a lot of times these boxes don't set real well in the wall because we don't hit things properly. This has all been foamed in place, and I've just picked the foam back with my bare hands, and that's quite solid now. That box will go nowhere. I've done this a lot where I've used foam as an adhesive to lock the box in place if I thought it was a little bit wobbly. So that works out kind of nice, and it's cheap and it's solid because the foam is an excellent adhesive. Over on the other side of the room, he said as he moved over. So I've set over to the other side opposite the wall we were just at, where I put the radiant panel in. We have 2 radiant panels up here, 1 in each of the bedrooms, and I was in the same situation. I just was able to pull up these floorboards and run pipe back to the basement from this location, this being the furthest one out. Right now I have these panels off. If I turn this up to the right number, this will start to get hot and will heat up the room. I've kept the heat off up here because Being upstairs, it stays relatively warm anyhow. The beauty of these Biasi radiant panels is the fact that these thermostatic heads with 2 in series will allow us to simplify plumbing. Here I have 2 separate zones of heat. I just have 2 pieces of pipe coming up from the basement, and then we just need to run one in between the two. One pipe goes to one end, one pipe goes to the other end, and we're able to feed the 2. So it's very simple plumbing. Whereas if it was a hot water baseboard, we might have had to do things differently. And of course, running it with PEX tubing makes all the difference in the world in keeping this a real simple system. Again, we have compression fittings underneath here, so there's been no even crimp connections up here. It's all been compression fittings. Here's something I missed last time we did the radiant panel. Somebody asked me about this. Of course, the PEX tubing is normally red in this case, and look what they have. Is that slick or what? They have a cover to match the color of the tubing that you just snap right over it. I had a whole bunch of these come in the box with the panels. I didn't know what they were. And Lloyd over at Bangor Pipe said to me, "How you like those covers?" I said, "What covers?" So we don't have to paint these. They'll automatically, just by trimming this with a scissor, we can make instant covers to make the pipes blend with the background if we want to. So that's worked out extremely well. Again, we showed it last, actually we just probably showed it on a rerun recently. We did the downstairs radiant panels. There's a hanger here and a hanger here, and we can move those hangers anywhere we want where we can hit a stud. So it's extremely forgiving in terms of installing these. We just find a stud, put the hanger on, take the panel and set it in, and bada bing, bada bang. The whole thing is done in a matter of minutes. So the biggest hassle is just getting the tubing to where the panel is. But this is done now, so we have heat in every room in the house, and it literally takes almost no time to do this. I mean, quite honestly, it is such a fast process that it boggles my mind that you're able to get a heating system done. And you know, I think about this stuff a lot, as you might imagine. A lot of people like to do radiant floors in houses. These panels run a couple of $100 each with the thermostatic valve, and each one is its own, and this is big enough to heat a much bigger room than this with a bigger heat load. So I have a real hard time in my mind's eye justifying doing a radiant floor when I can put something like this in that's so compact, so easy to service, and so user-friendly in terms of installation. And even if you're not putting it in yourself, if you're paying a contractor to do it, they're done a lot more quickly. In addition, we have just 2 half-inch tubes going into here, so we don't have a lot of expense in getting the heat to this panel from wherever the boiler happens to be. So it really, to me, makes a lot of sense, whether it's new construction or retrofit construction, to put something like this in certainly instead of a hot water baseboard. Even though hot water baseboard might be cheaper, over time it gets beat up. This doesn't get beat up. It's on the wall, it's out of the way. You can get underneath it for vacuuming, and it just works a lot better. So I've really been extremely pleased with the results using these panels. I've used them in my house, using them in this house, and we are just having the best, most comfortable heating, and it seems to be extremely economical. And again, with each one of those having its own zone, you just can't touch that with a lot of other things. So again, it's definitely worth a look at. And if you're retrofitting, I think it's an excellent way to go. And if it's an old house, you don't want to put baseboard in and have them look ugly, I think this is a lot more easy to look at. And of course, they do make the variation on this theme, which are bars that you can put in the bathroom where you can hang washcloths and towels and have them dry off the heating system. We got to go. We're out of time. We're really clipping right along now. Next step, I guess, is we got to get a floor down. Then we can start painting. We'll start painting, then we do the floor. We got to go. It's time to start thinking about stuff. Production support for Hot and Cold is brought to you by American Solar Technics, manufacturers of components for wood burning and solar heating systems.